isn't this kind of what we expected? Like in the back of our minds, like they're going to keep Eberflus, they're going to can Getsy, they're going to draft a rookie because we've seen the same program over and over and over again. And I think that's what's tripping up a lot of Bears fans right now is because it's like this is no different than when they kept John Fox and drafted Mitchell Trubisky. This is no different than when they kept Matt Nagy and drafted Justin Fields. Now you're going to go out and draft Caleb Williams potentially and pair him with Eberflus and a new OC, all for it to potentially get blown up next year anyway. And then it's Williams and a brand new staff.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't know, it's insane to me. I just don't, if like Ryan Poles must really, really believe in Matt Eberflus. Like, because this is job risky. Like, if this all goes downhill next year, Ryan Poles might be out the door with Matt Eberflus versus taking his shot to hitch his wagon to a new head coach who's going to get a fresh 3 years with a rookie quarterback. Because I feel like with a rookie quarterback, you would automatically give the guy 3 years unless you just completely screw everything up.
Right.
So that's the thing that is the most shocking to me with this. The fact that Ryan Poles is putting himself in this position because it feels risky for his job, for his sake. And I do think to the point of what you said with Poles' talent evaluation, it's been really strong, right? And I've heard a little bit about this out like throughout the day, and I just was parsing through some quotes from the press conference, and Kevin Warren made a really strong point about Eberflus's willingness to play rookies and to help them grow and be an active participant in their development. And on top of that, the stuff I heard throughout the day was that Eberflus is actually a supposedly a really good talent evaluator for a coach. And the coach is like, sure, it's the GM's job. The draft is their job. The free agency is their coaches have a lot to do with it. Like, but some coaches partake in that a lot more than others. And some coaches are a lot more active participants, a lot more interested in it than others. And I think Eberflus might have quite a bit of a hand in what is going on with the drafting and the talent acquisition that's going on too. So that makes me wonder if that might be a part of why Poles is so confident in it, because he feels like the two of them together are really working well on that talent acquisition front.
And I think if that is the case, because hearing that, admittedly, because that is something I did not read, that is exciting to me in a sense, because at least it gives you a little additional vote of like, okay, Matt Eberflus isn't probably just this lame duck guy that everybody thinks he is. Like, he brings value to the table in the head coaching position beyond just the on-field duties that you see on Sundays. I think, too, what is most interesting about that, though, is I think hearing that as well, Q, makes me even further believe they have to nail the offensive coordinator hiring. Like, they have to nail it. This cannot be Eberflus bringing in his buddy because he knows him and thinks he might do a good job. Like, this needs to be like, hey, the legitimate best candidate wants this job. We think he's the best candidate. He gets the job.
Yeah.
And there's so many names out there. I think that's the fascinating thing, right? Because like you look at the head coaching list and it's a much smaller list around football, right? Like it's your Ben Johnsons, it's your Bobby Slowicks, it's your, even though I don't even know if Bobby Slowick's been requested for an interview yet, maybe for Washington. I think that might be the only one. There's a lot.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a lot less names, it feels like, that are true, like serious contenders. Not saying there aren't guys that are going to get interviewed that, aren't deserving or just in that echelon. But it feels like the OC opening, there's so many more names that could fit there, right? Like you think about every quarterback coach in the league is effectively a candidate, right? And then all these OCs that are either changing positions or maybe their head coach got fired and they need to land somewhere else and they maybe aren't in that conversation for a head coaching job right now. Like all of those guys come into play for this. And it's almost more fascinating than the head coaching search because I think it's such a broader list of names in the pool that could potentially be brought in. Q, with that in mind, is there an OC that you really love? Because obviously they're not bringing in Ben Johnson to come laterally to a division rival at this point in time. Who in your eyes is the best, or at least maybe your preferred candidate for the Bears to bring in an OC?
So The quarterback coach with the Rams, Zach Robinson, he's a guy that I'd be really interested in just because you look at the track record of their quarterback coaches, their offensive coordinators in the past, it makes a lot of sense. I think it was in one of Nick DeMayo's article
Big shout
over
out
at
to Nick.
ontapsportsnet.com. I think he had Brian Greasy in there, which it's going to take some selling for me to get there with Brian Greasy after, watching him in a Bears uniform for a year. But coming from the 49ers, working with Brock Purdy, that is interesting. If you want a guy like Drake May, I think that gets really interesting because I think that's kind of what Drake May needs. He needs a Shanahan system. It doesn't need, but I think a
Would
Shanahan
benefit
system
from.
is where he will do his best work. But versus a guy like Caleb, I think Zach Robinson's probably going to give you more creativity on that front.
Mhm.
And even people hate the idea of Cliff Kingsbury, right? Like I've heard that, like the second his name got brought up, a chat I'm in just all started groaning and going, no, not that. But if I'm sitting here and honestly thinking about that, and I'm biased, I went to Texas Tech. Cliff Kingsbury held every record at Texas Tech till Pat Mahomes came along and broke them. So I am biased on this, but I think he did a pretty good job getting Kyler to play pretty darn well. Like it's not a given that Kyler comes in the league and starts playing well and keeps playing well. He's in the MVP conversation 2 years ago before he tore up his knee. Like Kyler was doing really good stuff under Cliff Kingsbury. And I don't think Cliff's a good head coach, but I think he's a really good offensive mind. So I can get behind Cliff. I'm probably not as excited for him as I would be like a Zach Robinson, but I could get behind him with Caleb.
No, I think that those are both intriguing names in this. I think the Brian Greasy is kind of a fascinating name just because of he's another kind of Shanahan disciple effectively at this point, right? It's coming from that McVay Shanahan tree, right? And I think, again, that's why Robinson makes a lot of sense. A couple quick comments here, Q, and I've got a name for you that I want to bounce off you as well. Scott said a little bit earlier, said if I was an OC, I'd love to take the Bears OC job. You could potentially get Justin, Marvin Harrison Jr., DJ, plus a lot of help on the O-line, or you could even get Caleb, help on the O-line, and then probably a receiver of some sort in free agency. He also adds, plus then you get all the credit for any increased productivity in the offense. Any random Chicago drunk on Malort. Yeah, probably. Rick says, how you guys doing? First time coming to the show. Welcome, Rick. Thanks for coming and dropping by.
Rick.
And we appreciate you dropping in. He says, maybe Pete Carroll will come run the show at Chicago. They've said he's going to be an advisor, but I think that's a load of horse shit. I think if a team comes and calls him to be the head coach somewhere, I could 100% see that happen.
Hey, Pete Carroll is the quarterback whisperer.
He really is.
The second Matt Leinart left Pete Carroll, dude sucks.
Garbage. Yeah.
The second Russell Wilson left him, he
garbage.
Sucked. Second Geno Smith got to him. Holy shit,
amazing.
Look at Geno. He's good now.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll's a quarterback whisperer. 2 years ago, I would have never expected to say that. But I am now convinced.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And speaking of Pete Carroll, this is actually the name I was going to. I think Scott kind of read my mind here a little bit. Seattle's OC, Shane Waldron, could potentially be a name because from what we've heard, all the Seattle coaches have been given permission to seek jobs elsewhere. They want to give the new head coach a fresh look at bringing in whoever they want. Waldron is a guy that, again, he's been a part of this. He's been with Pete Carroll, who, as you just said, is the quarterback whisperer. I think Waldron's a very fascinating name that could potentially be out there too, probably right along with a Robinson and some of these other guys, just because of the success that Seattle continues to have with, no, not a shot at Geno Smith. I mean, he's not a horrible quarterback by any means, but like you said, all these guys worked with Pete Carroll and worked in that Seattle system. And dare we say, look at Tampa. Tampa's offense coordinator came from Seattle. And Tampa's offense improved immensely and looked good with Baker Mayfield running the show. So I think that's another name to me that's so intriguing in all this, because maybe you do then have kind of that, you get the tight ends involved and you got a couple elite receivers. Like we've seen those Seattle offenses be very good over the years and give them a chance. I mean, even this year, they had a lot of things kind of not go their way, and they were still in the playoff picture all the way until week 18. So I think it's
Yeah.
another interesting name that's at kind of there as well.